go. And we are live. Welcome back to another installment of ENTP Life's live editions. On this series, I typically cover, a more detailed discussion on my topic of the week. So this week's topic was on my Piper Cherokee. I am a pilot. I own an airplane. And I wanted to kind of talk about what is kind of one of my loves outside of what I typically feature on this channel. So on ENTP Life, I mostly talk about real estate and business and any business venture that I'm in. So that could be home healthcare, real estate investing, Airbnbs, this YouTube thing, investing in stocks, whatever it is that I'm into. And I really try to do my best to give people a pathway to achieving financial independence so that they can go out and live the life of their dreams. Me personally, I plan on living an international global lifestyle where I own properties throughout the world and I'm able to travel nonstop with my family and friends, just really taking in what it's like or what it is to really be a human being on this planet, rather than working my whole life away and retiring at 70 years old to then realize that I haven't seen the world and my time is truly limited, right? The probability of passing away increases with age. So I don't want that to be my situation, and I don't want it to be yours either. So I do try my best to talk about investment strategies, things you could do to make some money so that you can break out of this typical rat race that we are in the United States. You could do that for as little as $1,000 a month if you're single. There's plenty of places in the world where you could get away with living for $1,000 a month and live a pretty decent middle-class lifestyle. You could do that in Brazil. You could do that in Colombia. And you could maybe skim it in Italy, which is another area that I'm covering. But anyway, today we're talking about planes. And for those of you who have come to my channel because of aircraft or because of being featured on Mojo Grip's channel, welcome aboard, because we are going to kind of pay off to you. It's been a while since I've done a video on aviation, and that's because I feel like they take me a lot of time. It's out of my typical routine. So I have to kind of think about, how do I want to capture a flight? I don't want to just capture me doing touch and goes, because that's not going to really resonate with the people who view the channel. So I'm going to try to cover videos where I'm flying places and I'm incorporating flying with my business activities, whether I'm flying to a different city to check out real estate, or I'm flying to a different city to check out a home care business for sale, or flying for like kind of tourism, because I've noticed people like me featuring other countries, what to do there, what life is like there, maybe touching on the real estate. So as I fly to different countries, then I could also include that on the channel. So expect to see me sprinkling a little bit more here. I'm also going to be covering a little more aviation here, because I'm launching another page that's going to be dedicated to aviation. I do have a nonprofit organization called Flight Forward, where we're looking to help people who are underrepresented in aviation pursue careers as aviators. So we're talking about racial minorities in the United States, women, and people of low income. A lot of low income people are discouraged from entering aviation because it is costly. On average, you're going to be paying about $200 an hour to train. And if you're going to pay to train to become a commercial pilot, you're looking at least 250 hours, in most cases 1,000 hours of flight time. So you do the math and it gets quite expensive. So there's people throughout the United States that fall into one of these underrepresented groups, either low-income people of all kinds. This is not kind of drilled down to any specific group, but also racial minorities and women, because how often do you see a pilot that's not a white male in the cockpit, right? And this has nothing to do with necessarily any kind of race issue, but there just aren't many pilots that aren't that in the United States. And people have a tendency to gravitate towards professions where people like them are represented, whether it's body type, skin color, sex, and gender. People will kind of move towards where they see people like them and however they identify in those roles. So you only see white males as pilots for the majority, that's the picture that people have in their minds, because that's kind of how it happens. And there's not enough other people who are there. And I just think if there's more representation, other people who might have had this like desire to even pursue aviation would say, hey, someone like me can do this too. And that's really what we're striving for. And we're trying to kind of bridge any gap that people may have. So that's my nonprofit. And as I start to cover more on aviation, I want to do it purely on that channel. So whatever revenue that channel generates, I'm able to point back to my nonprofit to pay for, fuel, flight training, discovery flights, so that we could get more people into the air and more people of all kinds and low financial backing into careers as aviators, so they're able to generate income and provide for their families one day. Now, this week's video, I gave an overview of my $35,000 1963 Piper Cherokee. Now, Piper is an American brand. And when I tell people I own a plane, a lot of them are like, what do you own, a Cessna? And I'm like, no, I own a Piper. Cessnas are like those dorky looking high wing planes. I always hated the way that they looked. They just didn't really look like your typical plane. Pipers are low wing aircraft that kind of have like a jet-like posture, and they look like real planes, right? To me, at least. So even when I was right before I started my training, the first lesson I ever took was in a Cessna. And I was like, I really don't like this plane. That was my first impression, right? I was like, I really don't like Cessnas. But Cessnas and Cirrus aircraft are the top two selling aircraft in the United States as far as American aircraft are concerned, and probably top two selling in the world, because America is certainly the leader in aviation. So Cirruses are really nice aircraft. They're composite aircraft, sleek, nice, fast, stylish. They've kind of taken over the general aviation industry, but Cessnas are tried and true and really part of the American brand. But anyway, I had this fascination with low wing aircraft, and I remember my instructor telling me that it's probably going to be cheaper for me to own my own aircraft and training it than pay a flight school. And I was already by the time I bought my plane, I was already into my flight training for about $10,000. And I was about 40 hours in, or maybe a little more than that, maybe like 45 or so. And I was like, you know what? Instead of putting down another 10,000 to buy another 40 hours of time, I think it was 40 hours. Yeah, it was 40 hours, 40-hour blocks. So instead of me putting another $10,000 down to buy another 40 hours, let me just put that money towards an aircraft that I'm going to keep flying continuously anyway. And then my flight training will get reduced down to my fuel cost, which in this aircraft is 14 gallons an hour at $5. So let's call it, or $6. So let's call that $84 plus the instructor is another $50. I'd be saving $70 an hour or so. That was my thinking for the rest of my flight training. Plus, I'd get used to the plane, and that'll be my plane to kind of count on. When I tell people that you could get an aircraft for $35,000, they're like, no way. They expect it to cost into the millions. And a brand new, fully equipped Cirrus SR-22 might run you just under $1 million, but you don't necessarily have to buy new aircraft. I'll explain what I mean. Aircraft are managed and kept to a fairly high standard. Every single year, you have to do what's called an annual inspection. They check against all manufacturer defects that have existed prior to that year. All those defects have to be addressed. And they checked all your control services, all your control cables. They check for rust. They check your engine functionality. So they'll do oil, like an oil exam to make sure there's no metal or foreign things in your oil, which would indicate your engine's kind of falling apart. They do compression checks to make sure all the cylinders are correct. They'll change out spark plugs if they need it. They'll change out your alternator and electrical system. They check everything. And they essentially almost tear down your plane to inspect it, put it back together, and give you a clean bill that, you know what, the plane is airworthy. This happens every single year. So when you're comparing a 50-year-old, 60-year-old airplane to a 50 and 60-year-old car that might have just been driven around for that long, there's really a different level. And when things get too far gone, you have to make those repairs, or you will not get cleared to fly that plane. So when you're looking at some of the older models, planes will depreciate out like any other asset class. But once you start getting to these old aircraft, you really get incredible value because you're eliminating any finance charges. To me, you're almost getting a plane for free in comparison to what the same sort of aircraft with newer avionics and everything else would cost you. It might cost you for an equivalent Piper. It might cost you about $400,000, I think, for the newest Piper Cherokees, and I think that's expensive. So if I could get basically a stripped down antique version of that airplane that's virtually the same, right? Same design, same sort of look. It just got older interior, older paint, but performance is just about the same. The thing that's going to usually be a lot different is, I would say, the avionics and the quality of those avionics, right? The radios are going to be better. You might have a completely glass GPS in cockpit system. You may have autopilot in there from day one. But like I said, I wouldn't drop $400,000 on a new plane, just like I wouldn't buy a brand new car. It's just not something that I would do just because of the depreciation. And for the same $400,000, right, I could get a really nice, like 2009, 2010 Cirrus SR22, or a really nice Piper Malibu that's in good shape, or Columbia 400 or whatever, versus a brand new Piper Cherokee, right? It just, to me, it doesn't make any sense. It always makes more sense to buy a used aircraft as a trainer or like as a time builder, right? And that's what a lot of people tend to do. So the process of buying an airplane can tend to be a lot like buying a home. There are 20-year loans for aircraft. You're not going to get a 20-year loan on a 50-year-old plane. That's just not going to happen. But if you were buying like a $400,000 plane, right, that's like a 10, 20-year-old plane, you would be able to finance that over 20 years. You'd put down 20%, go through the financial review, tax returns, your financial statement, that sort of thing, get approved for that loan, buy the aircraft. But you're going to also have what's called a pre-buy inspection. Now, the pre-buy inspection is like an annual inspection in a way. The mechanic is going to review all the logbooks for the aircraft for damage history, anything that's kind of weird. They're going to kind of tear down the plane, pretty much do an annual. And they're going to give you, a list of what they would recommend being fixed, what are potentially horrible things going on with the plane. They're going to give you a full inspection that you're allowed to either negotiate with or even walk away from that deal right after that annual is done. I mean, after the pre-buy is done. If everything checks out, you have your financing in place, you have your inspection done, the rest is just you executing the purchase. So those of you who own property, it's the same process, right? You find a house that you like, you make an offer, offer's accepted, you make sure that you have your financing in order, right? That's probably going to be part of making the offer, proving that you're able to buy it. And at the end of that, what ends up happening is you do your inspection and then you close and then you transfer ownership, right? Same exact process with an airplane. A cool thing for you guys to know, especially business owners and investors out there, is that aircraft qualify for, what is it called? Accelerated depreciation. Meaning, if you bought that $400 aircraft, you have the ability to depreciate all of it or most of it in the first year of ownership. So let's just say you made $400,000 in your business for the year. And you would have, I don't know, a 30% tax rate on that. Let's just say, right? You could turn around and buy an aircraft for $400,000, put down 20% to buy it, right? Or even less, depending on what you work out. Or you could refinance a property that you own or something like that. And then you could buy that plane outright, $400,000, and then you could claim that rapid depreciation the first year, making your net income $0. right? So you could buy this aircraft, offset your taxes, life is good. So for those of you who are business owners or entrepreneurial in a way, and you're thinking about aviation, keep that in the back of your mind that when you do buy your aircraft, that you're going to be able to expense out that aircraft in a single year and squash out, a big piece of your tax liability. Obviously, when you sell that aircraft, you have to kind of recover that. But that's kind of what that is. At this point, I'm going to turn this over to anybody who has questions. This is why, like, I'm looking. I only have 8 people interested in this topic for today. Now 7. One person signed off. This is why I don't really cover aviation too much on the channel, because I know a lot of the audience isn't really like into aviation. I think less than 3% of the world's population has an aviator's license. I feel like it might be less than 1%. But one of the statistics I saw was 3%. So let's talk about, some questions that you may have as people who are interested in aviation, potentially interested in aircraft ownership, so that we could talk about that. Okay. Rob, what's going on? How are you? Describe the experience of a first solo. Question: Are you training right now, and are you preparing for your first solo? I'm kind of curious, and I'll start talking about that now. So, your first solo is like losing your virginity. It's probably the best way that I can put it. You're kind of excited that it's going to happen, and you're like, I've been thinking about this day. It makes me, it's going to make me feel accomplished in some sort of way. At least that's how I felt when I lost my virginity. But yeah, it's kind of like that. You're nervous. You are excited, and you're scared, right? You're all those things at the same time, because before your first solo, you're flying with your instructor, and you know that if things were to go wrong, you have somebody to back you up, right? Whether, let's just say your radio went out, you had a bird strike, all bad weather, something weird that happens, engine outing. You when you have your instructor right there next to you, you always feel like he's your parachute, he's your safety, or she's your safety. So on your first solo day, you don't have that person. Also, on first solo day, you're like, well, now my flight training gets a little less expensive because I don't have to pay for an instructor every time I'm up in the air. I can go out there by myself. It's not based on his schedule. It's based on my schedule. You get cleared to fly that aircraft, do pattern work, do your usual routine. So it makes you feel like really one step closer to being a pilot. For my first solo, I was probably at like 30 hours. I had 3 instructors before I first soloed, because my first 2 instructors jumped ship and went to the airline. So it's every time you start with a new instructor, they almost take you back to the beginning, especially when you're early. They want you to fly the way that they want you to fly. So 30 hours, I felt good about it. I was training in a Diamond DA-20. I really like that plane. I've been thinking about buying one. And before you solo, you do the first half of your training. I think your training is broken up into 3 parts. The first third, I would say, are the basics to get you into the air and back onto the ground, right? So it's going to be your radio communications, understanding airport diagrams, understanding the basic rules of the air, taking off. And then all your maneuvers in the early stages are to teach you how to land, how to control turns, how to climb, how to descend slowly, how to manage a stall. All of those things are your preparation to landing, right? And I didn't realize that's what was going on until we started to land. And it was like, okay, now you're moving into slow flight and a controlled descent at 500 feet per minute. And it's like, oh, okay, now it clicks that all this time that we've been practicing this in the practice area, it is the control of an aircraft that's needed to land. Landing an aircraft is probably the most difficult portion of flight. It's where you're really have all your skills as a pilot firing. You're talking on the radio, either with air traffic control or CTAF on the common frequency, and you're managing to play aircraft slowly. You're looking out for other traffic because, obviously by an airport, that's where the most traffic is. You're making sure not to hit birds. You're dealing for wind compensation relative to the runway. And you're essentially in a controlled crash, right? You're bringing the plane down controlled into the ground, right? So you're managing the rate in which you come down and in contact with this narrow strip of asphalt or grass even. So all of those things happen prior to your first solo. You have all the training that you need. And when your instructor sees that you've done enough landings, that you can manage to go around, that you know how to predict and manage your stall, obviously your takeoffs, from day number one, you're taking off on your own. So obviously taking off is not their concern. It's your radio work, your pattern work, and your landings that are going to dictate that. On your first solo, you're expected to do 3 takeoffs and 3 landings to a full stop, meaning you go all the way back to square one instead of doing like what's called a touch and go, where you literally touch the surface, power up, and take off again. You have to do 30 minutes already. Oh, the card is full. Give me 1 second so I can manage this. Let's go. I'm still here. It's just that I got to switch my camera. Right in the juicy part. There we go. Sorry about that, guys. The hardships of live video here on ENTP Life. That freaking sucks. Yeah, so you're expected to do 3 landings to a full stop. And after that point, hopefully everything went well. Your instructor will sign you off as cleared to fly that particular aircraft type solo, and what your restrictions are. They might restrict you to a certain visibility or crosswind or something along those lines, something that they feel that you could handle. And when weather is good, you'll be able to go out there, practice your maneuvers on your own, practice your radio work, practice whatever you feel you need to practice. Because part of your flight training is actually getting yourself to to meet all the minimum requirements. So some of those minimum requirements are time. Some of it is it's mostly time, type of flight, and whether it's daytime, nighttime, cross-country planning, and solo time, instructor time. So it's mostly time related. And you're going to need to hit those time milestones, right? So while you're trying to hit those time milestones, you should be training on the things that you're more or less weak at, whatever the maneuvers are, whether it's steep turns around a point, those sort of things. But yeah, that's pretty much your first solo. You'll feel very accomplished. You would feel like you've truly made progress because, like I said, you're letting go of that crutch, right? It's like the kids walking for the first time. They let go of the couch and they, off to the races. So that's pretty much what it's like for your first solo. What's up? Thank you. Yeah, and all you guys, even though I had my technical difficulty, don't forget to like, subscribe if you're not already a subscriber, and share this with anybody you think may be interested in hearing about this. Other students, other pilots, etc. What's going on? How are you? I love aviation. Will own soon. What do you? Are you a pilot? Are you training? Where do you live? All those details. I'm kind of curious. And what sort of aircraft do you expect to get as your first aircraft? And then what is the dream aircraft? Ebony Riley, don't you need a certain size plane to go overseas? No, you don't. You need enough range for your aircraft to go overseas. So here's an example. It's only like 55 or 60 miles from Fort Lauderdale to Bimini, Bahamas, right? So we're talking about, this is like a 45-minute flight, right? 40-minute flight, whatever it equals. It's a short flight. That's flying overseas. That's flying international, right? And just about any aircraft can make that flight, right? As long as it got gas in it. Even a small experimental would make that flight. It's not a long distance flight. And that would be considered an international flight. What you need to make international flights is you need a customs badge, you need a radio license, you need a radio station operator license, and then you need some other radio license. I have all of them that enable me to do international flights. So the biggest limiter from flying from one country to the next is going to be your fuel capacity, right? If you're trying to do a transatlantic flight, you're going to have to, in my aircraft, I would have to fly up into Canada, Nova Scotia to Greenland to Iceland down to the UK, and I'd make my way that way. And I'd probably have to have extended tanks because I get about 1,000 miles on my aircraft. So I might have to have like an auxiliary tank of like 50 more gallons to give me another 500 miles or so. So that's going to be your biggest limiter. And plus, are you going to want to be flying 10 hours straight to make the distance? So in short, no, you can do it in a small aircraft. There's plenty of people who do it. My Piper Cherokee has logged quite a few world rounders. Not my particular aircraft, but my model. So you could actually look that up and see which aircrafts have the legs to do it and which kind of the useful load to manage the extra fuel. So a very long answer to that sort of question. MP London, I just had my first taster lesson. Okay, your discovery flight, but I have hope of getting my license in the near future. Well, you don't have to hope, just do it. Damien, hello. Are there any other questions related to aviation and what your experience is like? So, okay, I just realized, MP London, you just had your first taster lesson. Okay, you had your discovery flight, and you hope of getting your license soon. So, since you're in the beginning phases, right? I would say what you should be. I'll give you what I think is the best method for getting to solo quicker and getting through your flight training quicker and less expensive, and the least expensive as possible. Download Microsoft Flight Simulator and spend about $500 or $600 getting your flight sim set up. Get either a joystick or a yoke, get rudder pedals, get the full setup. You could YouTube, a good simulator setup. Get your ground school coursework, right? You could do King School, ground school. Do all your ground school first. You can even take your written exam. Okay? Get that out of the way, right? And also by doing all the ground school first, when you start having your ground school and all that with your instructor, you got to understand what he's talking about, right? It's going to make it a little easier for you to understand what your instructor is trying to tell you. Ground school written exam, get that out the way. Whenever you take a lesson, right, your lesson is going to usually be about 2 hours long. Half of the time in that lesson is going to be pre-flighting the aircraft and sitting on the ground waiting for clearance, okay? Once you're in the air for your hour and a half or hour and 20 minutes or whatever amount of time you can actually be in the air, you're going to go over a few maneuvers, right? So let's just say you're going over turns, right? Or taking off. Yeah, you're going to take off and you're going to go into turns and maybe radio communication or just listening to radio communication. They're not going to even let you do that the first day. What you're going to then do is go home, load your flight simulator, and do another 2 hours of that same lesson. Reinforce what your instructor did with you, right? And perform those maneuvers on your own, because once you could demonstrate proficiency in the particular maneuver, your instructor is going to be like, wow, okay, you're doing well, move you on to the next thing, okay? So let's just say it's steep turns. That's where I really had trouble. You could go home to your flight simulator, load your aircraft, load your airport in high definition, load all the landmarks. It's going to look like flying over your home airport. You could use ground reference. Everything will be the same. And you're going to simulate your flight. You're going to go out there, go through the maneuver, practice it, practice the sight picture, practice, get it down. So when you go up for your next lesson and your instructor tells you, all right, I want you to do an accelerated stall or a full power stall, right? So you're going to go, you're going to do it. You're not going to be nervous. You're going to get it done perfectly the first time. And he's going to be like, okay, maybe do that one again. Okay, you got it. Next maneuver. So you're going to be able to progress through your in-air training so that you're not spending a bunch of money doing the same stuff over and over. And there might be a whole week between one lesson to the next. And you're going to lose your skills. You're going to lose them. So practice on your simulator. And that's going to help you kind of minimize the amount of time that you're going to have to pay for training and the amount of time in the air. The only trade-off is real flying is going to be your best teacher, right? Because you're going to feel different flying, right? You have the engine noise, you have the motion of the air, the bumps, etc. You have the angry air traffic controller, all these variables that only life will teach you. Like you're going to be in situations where it's gusty, it's hazy, it's all these different flight conditions that, you know what, feel a whole lot different when you're chair flying or you're in a simulator than when you're really behind the yoke of the aircraft. So when you're doing that, you know, I would caution that. For me, it took me about over a year to get my license. And I was in the Northeast at that time, so I had 4 seasons. You know, in the fall, it's always freaking gusty. In the summer, it's always bumpy because of the heat, right? The winter, you're dealing with ice and ice concerns and maybe slick runways. You're flying in a cold aircraft. So going through all the seasons gives you, in summertime, you get the thunderstorms, gives you all of the different scenarios that you may encounter in real life. If you were to kind of cram your training down to, you know, a month or 2 months where you're flying every day in Arizona, for instance, where it's just hot and clear every day, how are you going to deal with crosswinds when that happens? How are you going to deal with precipitation when you come into that? Are you going to freak out? Are you going to be ready for it? Those things will change your experience. But, you know, that's overall my recommendation to all people who tell me, hey, I'm thinking about getting my private pilot's license. It's like, do your ground school, get a simulator, and get ahead of the curve, because that's probably going to save you easily 30 hours of flight time, just being able to practice. But you want to make sure that you're practicing the maneuvers the way that your instructor told you. So I wouldn't encourage you to try to do things on your own, because you're not going to know if you're doing it right or not in the flight simulator So make sure you do it to the standards of the flight instructor, which is to the standards of the FAA, and how your instructor, not your instructor, but the 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 tester during your check ride is going to kind of the standard that the tester is going to hold you to. That's also the standard that your instructor is going to try to hold you to. All right. But that's my advice there. If anybody has any other questions about aviation or kind of my journey as a pilot, let me know. And if anybody here is in the South Florida area, I try to fly on the weekends. Past 2 weeks, I haven't flown, unfortunately. But if the weather is good this Sunday, I might be going up. I'll probably overfly Key West or something, or go to, I don't know, Naples. Who knows? My mom's gonna be here, and she's never flown with me, so I might take her up for just like I think I'll do that. I'll take her up for like a sunset flight or something like that. But if anybody does want to fly with me and get exposed to aviation, let me know. Also, you could check out my nonprofit organization, flightforward.org, and you could see exactly what we're working on there, and if that's necessarily something that you want to see if that's something that you want to get involved in or contribute. The idea there is that, like the movie Pay It Forward, we want to be able to train aviators, right, at a low cost. I want to try to get that cost down to like less than $5,000 to commercial pilot. So train aviators, get fuel donations, get aircraft donations, have instructors volunteer time, so that when we train somebody and get them all the way to CFI, which is a flight instructor, flight instructors can get paid and earn money, right? That's the start of that's most people start to their career in aviation. They go all the way to commercial, then they become a flight instructor, and then they build time instructing, getting paid, and then they move into the airlines. So the idea is if one of the Flight Forward students goes from start to CFI, that they will volunteer their time for the next Flight Forward student. And that cycle kind of pays it forward, like that movie. Everybody kind of pays it forward. And then when they become commercial pilots and they're making the big airline bucks when they get, to fly a 777 or a Dreamliner, they can donate some money, donate time, donate back to that next generation of pilots. So definitely check that out. You can kind of see what we're up to there. Right now, I'm just doing like discovery flights and trying to get people interested in aviation. And as I have more time to commit to the project and more people willing to commit to the project, then we can get into the first aircraft that we're going to put up, and then the first student and that sort of thing. So it's exciting times. And as we roll out that channel, I'll be making announcements on ENTP Life. Another thing that I want to talk to you guys about, I was on a podcast that launched this week, today, actually. So I'll share that link so you can go check out that podcast. Give me 1 second. Where is the link? This always sucks. Whenever you're looking for something, you can never find it. Failure number 2 for the day. Bam. On the Expat Money Show. So I got featured here to kind of discuss my experience of buying properties internationally, living overseas, and what that's like. It's an hour-long video, not video, but an hour-long podcast where I talked to Mikkel about my experience and his own experience. He actually just moved from Panama to Brazil. So he's now in Florianopolis, Brazil. So if you want to kind of check that out, I believe he's Canadian. And he has been living an international lifestyle for, I think, over 10 years. And that's all his channel's about. So for those of you who've been thinking about breaking out the US or breaking out of your country and living somewhere else, definitely follow his channel and, make sure you let him know that I kind of routed you there. I'll also be sharing that link in my community section so that you guys could also check it out if this link is not registering. There's some more questions. And you could, check that out. So Expat Money Show, I put it in the comments. You can check that out. That's the link there. Also, let me know what you think of that interview, if it was a positive one, if you enjoyed it, etc. Had a PA-32 cost around $12K a year to run. Yeah, the Cherokee 6 pretty much is not that different than the 235. They're running on the same engine, pretty much the same engine, and just souped for more horsepower. Similar useful load, except the 32s. Am I correct? The PA-32 is that? Hold on a second. Hold on a second. PA-32 Piper. Which one is that? I think that's a Saratoga. Yeah. So I guess it's the 6 conversion. Was it a fixed gear or one of the retract Saratogas? So it's a Cherokee 6 and it became the Saratoga or something along those lines, right? But yeah, so is that inclusive of your annual fees and your fuel cost? Was that your all-in price? Insurance and everything? Because my annuals tend to run between 4,000 and 6,000 after, everything, there's always something that got to get fixed. So after getting everything fixed, my typical oil changes throughout the year, a little service here and there for things that go wrong. General preventative maintenance sort of stuff. My insurance, I feel like, is less than 2,000, and then my fuel burn of about 100, let's call it even $100 an hour, fuel and oil, that sort of thing. I would say it's probably my annual costs are like maybe 9,000 to 12, around there, 9 to 12, because tie down and everything else, it's around there. I think you could get away with budgeting around $700 to $800 a month as a safe number if you're thinking about getting a typical GA aircraft like a Cessna 172, a Piper Cherokee, Piper Tomahawk, Cessna 150, 180s, things like that, or 182s in the Cessna line. But yeah, I would budget anywhere on the low side $600, on the high side, yeah, even close to $1,000 a month, and that should allow you to get anywhere from like 50 to 100 hours of flight time in a year. I would say it's kind of a safe thing. Oh, what's my dream plane, man? It's pretty much what every pilot's dream plane is. So Pilatus PC-12 is number 1 on the list. Number 2 on the list is a Cirrus Vision Jet, would be number 2. Number 3 on the list probably is the Piper M600 or the TBM 9. So those kind of round out the top 3. Next aircraft is most likely going to be a Columbia 400, a Cirrus SR-22, or a Piper Malibu. I need to get an aircraft that I could get, 200 miles an hour plus. I'm kind of on the fence between if I'm looking for speed, the Columbia 400 to the Malibu. If I'm looking to get what's most likely is to be available, would be an SR-22, just because there's so many of them on the market. Oh, listen, $4,000 an hour is just brutal. Um, so yeah, it could get that way. And were you flying the Hawker? You're flying as a commercial pilot, or that was your personal aircraft? Because 4,000 an hour is pretty beastly for a solo aircraft. Because I think the Hawkers require two pilot operation, right? Or am I into kit planes? Not really. Um, I think the kit planes and the experimentals are cool. Um, I think you could get like there's so many nice ones, man. Um, but I'm not necessarily into them because I'm realistically not going to build my own aircraft, and I'm not like a collector of aircraft, at least not yet. So when I'm looking at aircraft, I'm looking at certified. I thought about experimentals. Um, there's one in particular that they're small. What are they called? Ugh. They're cheap too. They're like $30,000. Man, they're pretty popular too. Sonics. Yeah, they're small Sonics aircraft. They're a cheap kit. They're pretty full fuel efficient. You probably get like $4, 4 gallons, 4 gallons an hour on that aircraft. But they're really small. They have a range of 360 miles. So you really could get them for pretty cheap. They have what they have one. They even have a jet, an experimental home built jet. Doesn't have much of a range on it, um, and it's pretty pricey. I feel like for the price uh, of that jet, you could get faster aircraft certified. But if you wanted a home built kit jet, they are out there, which is really really interesting. Um, Dope idea. Yeah, it's those are the things that I want to spend more of my life doing. So that's why I have this last business run in me before I dedicate my life to my family and the things that interest me. Oh, the Hawker Hunter. Gotcha. Let me look that up. The Hunter, the Hawker Hunter. I was thinking your typical Hawker jets. Uh, Hawker. Let me look this up. 4,000. Jesus Christ. Oh, they're pretty sweet looking. 715 miles an hour, man. I need one of these. $1,900 range. What do you know what they resell for nowadays? I could look that up, obviously. But I'm curious. 4,000 an hour. An hour and a half, that's 6,000. Jesus. From Florida to New York, that's just too much money, man. And it was 4,000 an hour as far as the fuel. That's just purely on fuel burn, or was that factoring in maintenance and support for that aircraft? You have to imagine. I have to imagine that has to be part of it since it is a military edition aircraft. God, sick. Golly, man. $4,000. Yeah, but it does 715 miles an hour. It's running on a Rolls Royce Avon engine. It's pretty sweet looking. Awesome, man. Yeah, that would be cool. Fuel was 2,000 an hour. You could get one for 100 grand. Of course, yeah, of course. So it costs you 4,000 an hour to run. 620 knots, no upper Mach limit. Really interesting. Fuels 2,000 an hour. So yeah, I've always fantasized about having one of those military edition jet aircraft because they're fast, right? That's a cool thing about them. They're pretty fast. They're pretty cool. They're loud as hell. And you know, if you're someone who's like, I want to be a point A to point B straight line as fast as I could go, those military jets would probably be the ones that do the trick. But 2,000 an hour in fuel, that's pretty killer. And then you only got 2 seats in there, right? So it's not really built for comfort either. But that's really interesting. Thanks for sharing that. You know, it adds some texture. Landing fee was $300. Parachute repack was oh Christ, because it has to land with a parachute. The landing fee was $300. The parachute repack was $300. Before and after flight was around $1,000. Man. 2 seats. There's got to be a better way. There's got to be a better way to get a military jet. 7.5 tons landing fee. Gotcha. Wow. Yep. That will do it to you, man. Thank you for definitely sharing that. That's rather interesting. Because those are the sort of things and sort of conversations I would love to have on my new channel whenever that launches. And you know, and kind of really geek out about aircraft and the sort of things that come along with it. But once again, thank you guys all for joining. It's been a pleasure to be able to talk about one of my passions and really have a sounding board for that. Those of you who are interested in learning how to fly or flying with me, just reach out. I'd love to talk to you about it. Really want to see more people, you know, do this thing that I love. Thank you for joining me here at ENTP Life. If you're not already a subscriber, make sure that you subscribe, share this video with somebody that you know will appreciate it, and I'll see you next week in the next video. Take care.